What up, y'all? This is your Don Israel coming to you live from Lit, asking y'all to subscribe to the channel. So make sure y'all subscribed, make sure y'all liking the videos, make sure y'all commenting, and make sure you turn on your notifications that let you know when new videos are dropping. We're dropping them daily, and you want to be on it because we on it, all right? So keep it lit, keep it locked, subscribe, we out. Marduce is a drink. What's going on, y'all? It's your boy, your Don Israel, aka Liddy Fontaine. Pretty Liddy is what they call me. And this is another episode of Lit, the premier platform, excuse my language, the premier platform for all things literary, swaggy, and everything in between. Today's guest is a special guest. We have the brilliant Claire Messud in the building. Thank you for coming, Claire.
Thank you, Don, for having me.
All right, so we always start the episode off with the swag cam. So have you stand up a little bit and walk us through the swag for today. What's Claire's swag?
Well, you want to know what I'm wearing?
Start from bottom to the top, top from the bottom.
Okay.
How we curating?
So the shoes,
yes.
The shoes come from she's a designer in Austin, I think.
Okay.
Called Elizabeth Suzanne.
Okay.
Yeah, and I love about them, they're the most comfortable shoes I own.
That's the best way to do it.
And then you can flatten them right down in your suitcase. And then I'm embarrassed to say I feel like
come on, don't do that.
I'm all J. Crew.
Come on, them sales. Is this sale J. Crew or this retail J. Crew? This speaks to your.
This was sale.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is retail.
Sale and retail, hollow. I'm loving it. The swag is here.
And then I got my Timex.
Ooh, all right.
Got
the
my
timepiece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, loving it.
That's sort of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you for being here. Now, told you, this is the Marduce cocktail drink.
Okay.
It's the official drink of Lit, and basically it's 3 parts Martinelli's, 1 part Douce, all parts delicious. What you're gonna do is you're gonna pop the top, and you're gonna drink. You could drink to the leaves, but you could drink a little bit before that. Then I'm gonna pour it in.
You're gonna put it in,
swirl
and then okay, we're gonna move it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna move with that. So thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Is that enough? Did I drink enough?
If
A little
enough?
more?
Yeah, a little bit more. And then
There we go.
Going on.
Look at that. So does that drink have a name?
It's Marduce.
But the combo?
Yeah, the combo is Marduce.
The combo is Marduce.
But
Okay.
the juice itself is Martinelli's apple juice.
Gotcha.
Then you're gonna swirl it around.
You better put the lid on first. Although that could be my swag thing. Spill my drink on my outfit.
All right, now, boom.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that is nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's tasty.
Yeah. So, Claire,
You know.
let's talk.
Yes.
When I met you, I want to say 2 years ago at the new school, I was a student. You were in a conversation with Honor Moore. Y'all were talking about writing. I stood up in the back. I was already in the back, and I asked you a question about who do you imagine yourself writing for? And I remember one of the things you had said was like this thing about wanting to connect with your daughter. You know, like writing for people are great, but that intimacy of wanting to connect was had an importance to you. And then 3 years later, I read a story in W Magazine about you going to your daughter, trying to make sure you got the dialogue right for the book. So What was that process like? Like, what led you into being allowing yourself to use the novel as a way to connect with your daughter?
You know, I think one of the things that happens as you don't have kids yet.
Nah, I'm 27.
No. Well,
that doesn't mean anything. I don't know if that was like arbitrary. No.
Because plenty of 27-year-olds have kids, but yeah, I didn't think you had kids. But the first years, I mean, you look back and they went quickly, but they feel slow, and then suddenly it just is speeding up.
Right.
Like they hit like 10, and you suddenly realize they're going to be at the door in 10 minutes. You know.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of it. Was realizing that my daughter is moving into her own life, which is a great and exciting and wonderful thing, but that I wanted to try to make that sort of connection through writing before she went, you know, and that time was sort of running short. So it was weird for me in a way. You know, what happened was I was writing this. She was one of the people I mean, she was sort of central when I was writing it. I was thinking of her. It's not about her. It's not a story from her life, but I was thinking about her. But I asked her to read the manuscript, as you said, and that was a slightly weird thing for me because then it was like making it into homework kind of for her, you know. I think she took it in the nicest spirit. Like she felt like, oh, that's a gift my mom is giving me that I have a chance to respond to it.
And it's also a beautiful thing about like, how often and writers especially sort of write, and this, even though like, and I have to say this because we have a podcast element to it, but like The Burning Girl isn't about your daughter, right?
No.
But there's a lot of ways in which writers often write about their children in a way that the children are not included in it. Meaning like the children have no say about their lives, and so like what should be personal becomes public in a way that like renders the child powerless. And so even in allowing your daughter to read and kind of interact with the work allows her to be a part of the art, which
right.
is, I feel like often I don't think writers include their children in that meaningful way.
Oh, I don't. I think usually not.
Yeah.
And I would say, I mean, I'm not somebody who writes from life.
Yeah.
I sort of make stuff up, and I actually think if I did write from life, it would have been much harder, right? If I felt that it was actually her story or her life that was being told, I think it would have been. It would have felt complicated to put it in her hands and ask for her advice on it or her. Do you know what I mean? It would have felt different. Like I'm always just generally, I feel like making it up just makes everything easier.
So what was the impetus for going back to like adolescence and focusing on like adolescent friendships between girls?
Well, there are a bunch of bunch of impulses, and one of them, was watching our kids go through that time, so that you're as an adult, you're all your own memories come back. Mm-hmm. You're reliving it, but you're also living it as a witness in from a different perspective. And I think that the combination of those two things. There was also for me the component of a sort of something that happened when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That I don't know if you may have read something about it because I told people, but when I was in Australia as a kid, and then we moved to Canada, and there was this story of something that happened to a girl who was in my class then, who some years later tragically died, but I didn't. It was like the Gospels. I wasn't there. Right. I didn't know. What I had was these letters that my friends wrote to me.
Yeah.
And they were all each with a little different bit of the story, and so then I was putting together this version in my head of what made sense to me, with no idea of whether it was totally false or and I still to this day don't know whether it was totally false.
Yeah.
But the story always haunted me, and I think part of what haunted me about it was this way in which we never really know what happens.
Yes.
That in life we think we know, or we put we like, I have this, and this, so I draw a line, like I feel like it must go like this.
Right.
But actually, it could go just, there could be all kinds of stuff in that space that we don't understand.
Right. And I think, and so sometimes, like, I think writing is that way of like trying to connect dots.
Yes.
Right. That also, and I come from the background of like, at least my discipline is like the essay, and I like the essay as a form because it allows me to attempt. Right. There's no promise of the success of what I think might have happened. But to be allowed to even kind of try to figure out, like, well, what did happen? Right. To even ask the question is important.
Yes.
And I think that, when you lose a friend, if you care enough to ask the question, that lets you know that person was a friend, as opposed to, there's people coming in and out of your life, and you're like, oh, yeah, like, what happened to that person? But not, like, really trying to investigate it, but, like, kind of like, oh, yeah, what happened to so-and-so from, third grade?
Right.
But you don't really care. But it seemed, not even what it seems, but what this book showed is, like, this intense relationship that occurs, and then it kind of just like.
Well, see, this is another thing I think about that time of life. Right?
Yeah.
Is that people change? They change so fast.
Yeah.
And they don't change at the same pace, and they don't change in the same ways, right?
For different reasons as well.
For different reasons, there are all kinds of reasons, but just literally sometimes just physical stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like one girl will just mature physically.
Yeah.
2 years before another, and then like they're interested in different things. They want to do different things, because they're at different moments.
Right.
But that's just one of the thousands of reasons, But then it's hard to keep things as they were. Stuff just changes, and you sometimes never know why. I mean, I lost friendships at that age, and I look back and I think I still don't know why. I don't know what from one day to the next. I don't know what happened.
So and what's interesting about your life is that you moved pretty often. So that's also like, what was, with all this transience, what was sort of the constant thing during these periods of like moving?
Well,
for you as a
for me, in retrospect, I would say my family.
Okay.
And that was that was the thing that was the thing that moved with me.
Yeah.
And I have one sister, and we were.
She's older or younger?
She's older.
Okay. How many she has you by?
She's 20 months older, so a year and a half.
That's pretty close.
We're pretty close in age, and we're pretty different in lots of ways, and but we're very close, and then we were very close, bickering a lot, but we don't bicker now.
Yeah.
It's good now.
So, who was the first writer for you that sort of like taught you the possibilities of literature? That literature could do not what you wanted to do, because it's hard to say what you want anything to do when you started out. But who was the like sort of your vestibule into the literature?
I'd have to say, because I realized as soon as I realized that telling stories was something you could do.
Okay.
I wanted to do that.
Okay. And so what was the experience around learning that stories?
I was little, I was doing I was like 5 when I said to my parents, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of children's stories.
Yeah.
That the very best children's stories, like something like The Little Prince, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I mean, I don't get me started because I feel like I can go on and on. But I can go on and on about like these amazing children's stories that made me feel like telling stories was magical.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, what I used to say is, I want to write grown-up books for kids. I want to write serious books for kids because kids are serious people.
Yes.
And then I don't actually write books for kids, or I haven't yet, because it's actually really hard, because kids are serious people.
Right.
But you have to be able to tell a story in a way that is going to interest a young person, right? Using a vocabulary that is meaningful but accessible to them, right? Like, it's actually really there are people who really have that gift. I haven't tried. Have you ever written anything for young people?
Being that I'm still like a young person. Well,
I meant like under 10 or under 12.
So the interesting thing, right, and this is what I've had to realize being 27 in the literary world, is like you're a baby, right? But then in the world, like my nephew, was talking to him, and I was saying things that like he had access to, and he was like, "How do you know that?" And I was like, "Why wouldn't I know that?" And I was like, "Oh, to you, I'm an old, like I might as well be like a crypt keeper, because it's like I'm
you're me."
Yeah, so he's like, "Oh, like why do you know like who Little Uzi is or whatever?" And I'm like, I'm not supposed to have access to that. And so I think the thing what's been hard about it is having to like humble myself all over again to the forces of what makes children, right? So it's like kind of having to keep up with what they have to keep up with in order to exist, right? And I think that's also like a very bewildering experience for a child. Is like you miss one day at school, for example, and it's like you might as well have been going for the whole school year, because one thing happens and like everybody's like, "Oh, you should have been here," blah blah blah,
and the whole dynamic can change or whatever.
And especially for a writer, because so much of our work requires us to remove ourselves from what's going on, and when we kind of insert ourselves back in our lives. Like I saw you said you were like, like just violently behind on all these shows, and it's like if you were in school, that would be like terrible for you, because it would be like, you're not watching this and you're not watching that, and like, oh, like, so for me, the decision of writing for children, or when I write for something I want a child to take in, I have to, it is hard, because I have to put myself in that place of helplessness, of powerlessness, and write from there.
Right.
As opposed to writing about powerlessness with a sense of power, of control over it.
Right.
But kind of write about it in the way that it happens.
Right.
Like you're kind of like, I don't even know what's going on. And I've seen that like kids will, like when I read it to them, they won't like necessarily read it, but when I read it to them, they get it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they might not necessarily pick it up.
Yeah, they wouldn't pick it up themselves, and that's what like the hard thing is like also thinking about the mediums at which a child picks something up.
Yep.
And like what resonates. And so, and I was on a train the other day, and I seen this mother reading to her kid, and the kid is just kind of, she's digging in her nose, and she's like looking everywhere else, but that just even having the sonic memory of a story helps. Because I think a lot of what comes to mean a lot to us is like, I guess the sensory memories that we like sort of inherit in our bodies.
Yes.
Like we remember what that story sounded like you said, like there's stories that you have, but like, could you tell them verbatim? Probably not, but you remember how they made you feel,
Right.
You remember sort of like the details oriented around it, and those things are like very important. And I see in this book especially. Let's talk about the plot of the book.
Yep.
The basic premise. Tell everybody the basic plot.
Okay, so the story is told by a girl named Julia, and
Okay.
she's telling it from just before she starts her senior year in high school.
Yeah.
But she's talking about her friendship with her best friend Cassie,
Yeah.
her best friend since nursery school, and what happens it starts with the summer after, between 6th and 7th grade, so, and goes through 9th grade.
Yeah.
So she's looking back from a couple years later, telling the story about how their friendship fell apart. And there were all sorts of things, they sort of drifted, but then things were going on in Cassie's life too. So.
Right. And then what's also, I think, another subtext for the novel is also the roles the mothers play between the girls' relationship, and that also sort of, to me, it was a foreshadowing of what was to come, of you seeing like the mothers like kind of like, she's a part of this, but she's not like a part of this.
Right.
Like,
well, I think parents do that all the time, and give us, as when we're kids, they give us messages that we sometimes don't fully appreciate, like we don't fully take in what's being told to us. I mean, what you were saying earlier about the sensory memory, of a story and so on. I feel like there's so much that our brains take in subconsciously, right? And actually, that's a lot of what we retain.
Yeah.
Not even consciously.
Not even the words. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's under the surface, and we took it in, and we know it. And like you know which of your friends your mom likes, and which ones she doesn't like. She may never say it, right? She may never
George.
say it. but like when you say so, George is coming over, you're like,
That's
right?
the mother's face too. Like,
But she doesn't say anything, but you know it,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like that's something that it happens in the book that in retrospect Julia is realizing, but at the time wouldn't necessarily have just would have been in the flow of life. She's realizing like my parents expected that friendship to come apart, for all sorts of reasons. And they wanted it to. Yeah,
and for me, especially when it comes to dating, that was even rougher.
Yeah.
With the girls, and she was just like. And
did she like anybody?
You know what she did that freed me of that? She told me that, you know what? No matter who you bring, I probably wouldn't like them. And she said, you know how I know you don't like, because it was a particular situation. I think I was a senior in high school, and you think you're grown. Like, it's like, I'm about to go to college. Nobody can't tell me nothing. And I was like, thought I was going to marry this girl or whatever. And I remember telling my mother, and she was like, all right, whatever. And then I ended up breaking up with her, and I told her. And I had told her, like, it was sort of like blaming her. Like, yeah, I don't date so-and-so anymore. And she was like, okay. And she was like, you know how I know you don't like this girl? She was like, you used to steal Game Boys. And when I told you not to do that, you still stole Game Boys. So if you really like this girl, you would not need me to justify, like, you would not need me as the person. So this is how I know you don't like them. And when she told me that, and the fact that she might never like any girl I brought home, it freed me up. That was another, sort of was transition into adulthood, was that you were doing things for yourself. Mm-hmm. Not by yourself, but you were like, if you did not have your own reasoning for doing something, then it shouldn't be done.
Right.
And that kind of like, I was like, oh, this is different. Like, okay, so now.
Your mom is wise. I feel like she was so wise to point that out, because she did it in a way. It sounds like she did it in a way that you could hear it.
Yeah, well, she saw my face, right? And you talk about the things, and that's what's hard for writing to get to, right? Yeah. Is like all the moving parts in the conversation, and like how do you get the with the facial expression in that same space,
right?
Less than like the way words really work, where it's like you said this, and then you have to kind of give like an adjective that sort of like lets you know how it was said, but sort of like create an environment where like you can see it, even when it's a yeah on the page, it's like that's not really a yeah though, like
right.
That's like a subtle threat that so that was, she saw my face, and she saw that like from that point I would probably always be doing the same act of bringing someone to her as an excuse for me to like them. And she was like, I don't even want to meet these girls. Right. Like, I know you're serious when you don't want me to meet them. And I was like,
right.
Fair played. So all of your books deal with women. The strength like independent of men. how did you? Why is that important to you as a writer, and more importantly as a person? Because I feel like that is something that goes off the page as well. Like I feel like that's something you just care about.
Right.
Like,
well, and it's not even talking about consciousness. Like it's not even conscious.
Yeah.
Right? It's not even like it's not as though I set out saying I need to write stories about women or. I mean, when I look at my life, I do and did adore my late father, you know, but I feel like I had a sister, a mother, an aunt, no uncles. My aunt never married. A grandma who had my grandfather on my mother's side died before I was born.
okay.
And my father's father, that grandfather I knew well and for a long time, but I feel like the women like carried it, the women carried it. Like my life was really a life. My dad was traveling.
So more or less like matriarchal and strong women.
So it didn't like it's
just like it's subconscious. It's like it's there.
Yeah. So like the stories that were in front of me or the stories that were around me, were women's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to write them in that way, I think, because I was raised by a single mother for most of my life, and then all the women in my life were there, but I had never written them on a page that way. I had written them as sort of periphery, because it's also that thing of like, how does this fit into my understanding as a man?
Right.
Right. And it's like, you're like, oh yeah, like I got, some of my favorite people are women, but I was never, until I read like Hilton Hall's, the women collect, I was like, oh, I have never written my mother in a real way.
Right.
I never written the women in my life. The girls I like they were always sort of like aiding me to self-realization, but I was never like, well, what was their own crucibles that they were dealing with? What was their
conscience? Well, yeah. And I feel like, it's an interesting question. I had a conversation a month or so ago in which a young man said to me, some books are for everybody, some books are for women. And I said, like what? Ooh. And he said, like Catcher in the Rye is for everybody and Pride and Prejudice is for women.
Shit.
And I was like, no, right? No. But I do think, but I think that's arising out of and it just culturally we have this issue across the board. We have this idea like, I'm interested in something that is like me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna close it down.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna look at stuff that's about people like me.
Right.
Right. And we do that across the board.
Yeah.
And I feel like we just the whole joy of reading.
Yeah.
Is that you can have a million experiences
Yeah.
that you would never have. You can know a million people that you would never know.
Right.
You can travel the world without leaving your room.
Mm-hmm.
You can travel time. You can read. You can read something about what it was like 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Without ever getting
like,
out of bed.
You don't have to go back there. Yeah. You yourself. You're like, all right, I
to,
got it.
Yeah. But I feel like that, in that sense, I would love to read what you might write about your mother or the women in your life. You would need to feel it was, that it was important.
Yeah, but and so for me, right, and this is the other difficulty, and I see you manage, you do what you can to manage those relationships, and I've also seen like some pretty like, I'm gonna say like fucked up reviews about your books, especially for men, like they feel like, oh, this is too difficult. Like this whole idea of the difficult woman.
Right, the last book they felt like the character was difficult. Yeah.
And I think what's interesting, and I've seen this even when I write about like my mother, for example, that it's hard to write about the sort of the humanity of my mother without the question of her being a bad mother, me being immediately thrusted on the table. Like, so if she made a mistake, like I've written about my father left when I was 10, right? It's almost like, oh, okay, yeah, men can do that. Men can sort of leave and not be there. We kind of expect them to kind of just not be present. But your mother made a mistake, and it's like, oh, like what, like why, and blah blah blah. Yeah. And so it's been like when I try to give my mother certain pages to read, it's hard for her to read it because she knows even in reading it how she's being perceived, and it's as a bad mother, not as this woman who is also her mother, right? So like she wasn't a mother first, she was a woman first. But how do you write that? And so the difficulty of writing about women is also like not having a lot of models, especially as male writers who write about women in meaningful ways. And I've seen that, like, you inhabit a lot of your male characters in a way that's very forgiving, right? Like, I don't remember the particular names. I don't want to say his name is Benedict. I don't know. But he had teased, who about her pimples, and then the friend came that she liked.
I'm not remembering this bit, but okay.
Yeah. Hold on, let me.
No.
Let me. Julia, I think, because Cassie had broken her arm.
Yeah.
And the boy was teasing Julia about her pimples or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And yet, even in that exchange, you find ways to like humanize the boys who do monstrous acts, whereas like when male writers write women characters, there's not that much forgiveness there, or not that much necessity to understand the motivations behind the actions, but sort of isolating the actions unto themselves and being like, this is what was done to me. And in that is like a lack of empathy. And so I've been trying to figure out ways to like, how do you write empathy into spaces that you don't necessarily, like you don't know, right? You talked about this.
Yeah.
Empathy, like I'm starting to write empathy in between those spaces.
Right. And I feel like that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I feel like it may be true when you're writing about some women characters. It's true for lots of women writing about men characters.
Yeah.
It's true, it's just true generally that I feel like there are certain writers, somebody like Chekhov, right?
Yeah.
Who, Russian writer from 100 and some years ago, like different culture, different time, different place, whatever. Short stories and plays, there are no novels, but if you read those short stories, he has compassion for everybody. Like he has compassion for the losers. He has compassion for the horrible people, compassion for the selfish people who behave really badly.
Yeah.
Like it's not as though they're automatically forgiven for that, but he doesn't judge them. He just portrays them.
Right.
And I think that as a writer, I try to take that as a kind of his approach as a sort of what would you call it? Not a guardian angel, but like something in over that I have always in my mind. Like he had this famous line he wrote in a letter to a friend. He said, "It's not my job to tell you that horse thieves are bad people. It's my job to tell you what this horse thief is like." Right? Yeah. Right? Like all I need to do is just you get to make up your own mind. You can love that horse thief if you want. You can think that horse thief is great. Like my job is just to tell you what the horse thief is like.
And it's what's interesting about that, and I think about like where we are, just as what we expect for books and just art to do, which is to tell us how to live, as opposed to show us what life is for other people or for whoever. And there's that constant notion of like, tie a bow on this for me.
Right.
Like, give this to me in a way that now I know. Like, so give me a way to read this in which I never have to read it again.
Right.
Right. So I could be done with it, as opposed to like, I have to now think and like reflect. I don't want to reflect. Like most people don't want to reflect, and they just want like answers, but not like more questions. Which like, I got my own questions.
And I'm like, again, like for me, that was a principled thing about writing this book and my last book is we don't have the answers. I'm not offering you answers. There's tons of stuff in this book. If you read this book, there's tons of stuff at the end where you won't know for sure. Like you have to make decisions what you think happened, or who you think somebody really, what they were really like. You have to make those decisions as a reader yourself.
Right.
Because my feeling was, I'm trying to show what that experience for this young narrator is like, and nobody's going to tell her.
Right.
And if they did come out and say, this guy's a bad guy, or this guy's a good guy, or this is how it went down, like, she's just going to be trusting what somebody else says. She's not going to know for sure. In life, we so often don't know. You realize that when you watch any sort of trial on television, or, where like you're just hearing two different versions of events, and then a bunch of people decide which version of events they think is more believable.
Yeah. And that's. Did you see the OJ? I don't know if you've seen the OJ, the miniseries.
I didn't see the miniseries years ago. I'm old enough. I watched some of the trials.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean,
Well, I think because what the show showed was how many competing narratives were at play on one case. Right. And I think the show did a lot to tease that out in a way where when you're living in it in real time, like you are sort of just watching it from like the lens that you have. Right. And you don't understand how all these other things, like the Sarah Paulson playing Marsha Clark. And like how like that narrative of her being a likable woman. Right. Had like how much of that had to do with whether this man was like convicted or not, and then like how much of like Christopher Darden being a sellout. Like it was like all these other things which had nothing to do with the case, you got to see like, no, these things have a real place.
They play into
Yeah.
it. And again, in ways we're not even conscious, right?
And then it forces you now, like, so when that moment happened, I'll never forget, like, at least the reaction video of, like, how polarizing the reactions were. And it was a polarizing, like, reaction that had not that verdict happened, you would have never acknowledged the rift that was so deep in culture. And it's the same thing with the current election of, like, how many people were sort of like, oh, what? Like, just, like, kind of, like, punched in the face, like, by
reaction. Did not see it coming.
So it speaks a lot to, like, blind spots that often happen that you see later that you didn't see there.
So it seems to me that one of the things that, I'm not somebody who believes in literature being purposeful, like in some directed way. But I do think that one of the things that books can do or reading can do is open our minds to that awareness, right? Of how much, all I know is that I do not know, right? To be in that space of I should assume nothing. I should, if I think that the election's in the bag, maybe I need to like look beyond look beyond my little world and ask bigger questions before, like, because one of the things about social media, just about the election, is that everybody was kind of talking in their own
circles.
Yeah. So you didn't hear it's like you were in different.
You didn't know. And some people, and I saw that a lot was I challenged a few of my friends of like, this practice of like, I don't like what I hear from somebody, so I'm going to block them, delete them. And I'm like, no. Keep that person.
Right.
Not because like, I get it. Like maybe pull yourself away from hearing the negativity, but keep that on the table so you're not blindsided by something that's there.
Yeah.
It's different to be like, I think a genuine blindside is when you're looking everywhere you could possibly look.
Right.
And something happens, right? That's a sucker punch.
Right.
But if there's a punch flying at your face and you don't move, that says like, what are you actually looking at? And so, like, for me, when I was, like, listening to a lot of the responses to, I can't believe this happened, I'm like, well, all right, so wait. I get the feeling of, like, disgust, but, like, how much shock is, how culpable are you in your own shock?
Right.
And that was something, like, and it's even with the friendship thing, it's like, we always go back to those places of injury in our lives, and we go, like, how responsible was I for that? Was I responsible? And like,
but do we ask that question? I feel like
you're right.
Maybe we should, but we definitely should. But I think most of the time we don't, and most of the time we construct a story. That's the thing, about competing narratives. Like almost everybody, if you had Cassie tell this story, there's no way in which Cassie would be responsible for the girls drifting apart at all, right? She would have a version where she was like, and then Julia wouldn't do this with me, and then Julia was mean about my new friend, and then Julia did this, and then that, like, and her version would not be like, and then I was, then I ignored her, and then I don't, like, we always tell, our understandings of ourselves are usually, we vindicate ourselves. We like,
yes. Let me ask you, when did you notice yourself doing that? I mean, maybe that's like a lifelong thing you always notice yourself doing, but when did that have great meaning for you in a way that like you felt like you needed to change it? Like when you didn't, where you felt like every story that I write or every story I tell myself doesn't require me to vindicate myself from it?
I think I've spent a good part of my life denying, I think, I certainly think when I look back, say, to the adolescent experiences, I certainly have this story where like, and then she was horrible to me in this way, and then we turned it like, and she was horrible to me, and then at some point, you're looking like, well, surely if that's happened like 3 or 4 times in my life, there must be some moment that I think though I was in my 30s, on the friendship front, I was in my 30s, maybe around 40, and had a trouble with a friend, and she was basically telling me I was like not being an attentive friend. I was being a sort of bad friend, and she was right. And I was like, well, there's this going on, and this and this and this. And
so like, what was like? So give me the timeline. Like, when did she tell you, and then when did you realize?
I think in my heart I realized, immediately. But I was not going to concede. I was not going to concede that.
Yeah.
I feel like, because it's a process.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Like, even if I know I'm not going to give you the satisfaction right now.
Well, also I feel like I'm sort of on my high horse about all kinds of whatever. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it took like 5 years.
That's real.
That's not so long. It's a while.
know.
At 27, it's a while.
Yeah,
When you get to
yeah.
50, it's not so long.
It's 5 years.
Yeah,
It's 5 years.
5 years.
We talked about Amy Winehouse as, and I'm really interested also, like, what does Claire Messud's soundtrack sound like?
Well, I always feel I live in a family with some very music-y people, right? And
Musically inclined, like as
Yeah.
they play, or musically like they just fans of the
both.
Okay.
So my husband, he had a classical music training, but
Oh, wow.
but he's a drummer, and he plays when he can, and he loves discovering things, and our daughter sings, and she is a huge fan of. She has so I feel like a lot of what I end up listening to is in the car what she puts on.
Yeah.
So somebody said to me for this book, like, how did you know, how did you get that? I was like, no, I was driving the car. I know.
Yeah, because you had to Rihanna in there. I'm like, all right, Claire, you got Rihanna references in the book.
Know that, and it's catchy too, that one. Yeah, that Eminem.
Yeah, I love
Rihanna
the way
song. Yeah, but she, for my own self, I feel like, back to Stories of Women, I feel as though the female vocalist thing is, there are a lot. I was in youth. Do you see who Joan Armatrading is?
No.
Does Tracy,
Teaching me, put me on.
Okay, well, she was this sort of 70s, 80s. She's from St. Kitts, I think,
Okay.
from the Caribbean. Guitar.
Yeah.
So I feel like Tracy Chapman mean anything to you?
I know.
Okay, so there would have been no Tracy Chapman without Joan Armatrading. Okay, so Joan Armatrading was, if you go listen, you'll see that she's, and then Tracy Chapman, and then I feel like there's a sort of jazz version that comes down then through, say, Nina Simone or down to Adele wise, right, and then Amy Winehouse, and I do. There's I also like. Have you ever listened to Emily Sunday?
No. I'll look her up.
Look her up. Yeah, she's from Scotland, I think.
Okay.
And then and another Scottish singer called Amy MacDonald.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a whole jazzy female vocalist moment in the UK when Adele was starting, sort of 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago. Maybe it's longer now.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking these up because one of the reasons why I learned to love Adele. I mean, I do like Adele, but the Amy Winehouse was Dinah Washington was my reference point, Etta James, and the way the voices carried the song itself.
Yes.
Less than the words. Sometimes the words will be saying one thing and the voice is saying something completely different, right? And that was also how I learned to listen to women too, how the words could be saying one thing.
Yes.
And then, but what's really happening is no, that's not a yes.
Yes.
You're oh yeah, go have fun. You go out, I'm going out, I'm not coming home late. Have fun. You're no, that's not a real have fun.
Right. That's a come
all
home.
Right.
That's a come home now.
All right, I'm gonna see y'all later, man. She said have fun, but I know that's not what that means.
Yeah.
But I was gonna ask you, even talking about voices, have you ever read Alice Walker's essay about In Search of Our Mother's Gardens?
Yes, but here's the terrible truth, I have the memory of a sieve, and I read it 25 years ago.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
Remind me.
So it was the essay about what happens when women, in her particular case, Black women, what happens to these voices when they're stifled? People go crazy, and so they have to find different ways to let their voices be heard. And for her mother, it was her garden. Her garden was where her voice got to be heard, and you got to see what this woman could do if she was given the freedom to just be. And in the book, I think Julia she says this thing about the vulnerability of her body as a woman, and what that vulnerability does in terms of what it doesn't allow you to be.
Right.
Right. So let me not even why was that important? I just like, I don't even know if it's a question, but like sort of like I want to talk like a lot about that because I'm seeing, and maybe not we, but I'm seeing a lot more of a reckoning with that truth in culture more, that like the narratives are from, and I think it's more important that it's coming from men who are starting to go like, wait, no, like this is a thing. Like we can't, as men, continue to sort of talk about this vulnerability when it suits us, but then it's like, oh, creating situations that are dangerous to women, then blaming them for trying to get out as safely as possible, right? And I think at the same time, like I'm talking to my little sisters, and I'm like even talking to women, and like how dangerous just walking it is.
Right. I mean, one of the things that's complicated is like, how dangerous is it actually? Our perception of danger versus the danger. Right. Some situations are really actually physically are dangerous. Other situations we just assume are dangerous. Like we're sort of trained. We're when you do driving classes, you learn to drive.
I'm from New York.
I
am never driving.
But they always say like we're gonna teach you defensive driving, right?
We're
gonna teach you
I've heard that
so that you don't have an accident.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how girls are brought up. Is like I'm gonna teach you defensive living, so that ideally you're never in a situation, because it is a thing where. If you figure out like, okay, I have the Uber app, or I have, a friend who has a car, or I have this, like, then I can go to the party because I know I can get home, right?
Yeah,
But I shouldn't go to the party, or I shouldn't go to the party and certainly drink or whatever. I cannot lose total control, right? Unless I know that I have a way to be safe.
Yeah.
And I think girls are just brought up that, like, you just.
And you said that thing in an interview about like. With your son, it was like, oh, you can come home at 13.
Right.
Like, I'm coming in late.
Right.
Just as long as you call. But
it's
like, can we come get you?
Yeah.
And that, like, that's also, even though it's done with well-meaning.
Right. It teaches her.
Yeah.
Right. It teaches her it's not okay for me to come home. And it's complicated because as a parent you want your kids to be autonomous and free and strong.
Right.
And on the other you want them to be safe. And,
right.
And I feel as the thing about violence against women in our culture is that if you actually step back and look, it's everywhere. So many years ago, I when we lived in the UK, I worked for a newspaper there, and I was sent by them to interview sex offenders in Dartmoor prison, which is a big prison.
Sounds rough.
It was a little, but it was because they had a cognitive behavioral therapy program they were starting, right?
Okay.
And basically, what came out of that is cognitive behavioral therapy is basically it's not like psychiatry going into whatever. It's like practical things. So you're going to change your life in this way, and that's going to help you not reoffend, right? Practical strategies. And basically, what came out of that is they have a lot of success. They have a lot of success with pedophiles.
Okay.
And that's because our whole society can agree that attacks on children are offensive. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's just heinous. They don't have parameters that work for rapists because of women, because the profile of a rapist is no different from a profile of anyone in society. And you can say like, don't look at porn or don't do this or don't do that. But you come back out in the world and like it's everywhere. Yeah. It's on a billboard. It's on the TV. It's on your phone.
So like you're holding like the person who like.
So it's just you because you can say to a pedophile like you're not allowed to live near a school. You're not allowed.
You could create parameters.
You're not allowed to babysit. You're not allowed to like here's a list of like 15 things you must not do.
Yeah.
And people don't want to reoffend. Yeah. Right. So they're like okay right I can do those things. It just in terms of violence against women, it's endemic in the culture.
I was reading Mary Gateskill had a essay about this. I think it was called like something about like rules and about like the preclusion to rape culture is these rules people set up for what is and what isn't rape. And she was speaking to the fact that the first sort of injury of rape culture is like when you teach somebody that it's bad like across the board without talking about the nuances of what that is, because it creates this thing where instead of people doing this thing where they're just immediately gonna when situations happen and you tell somebody this was rape, they're like, oh no, I love my mother, and it's like, wait, what like that.
Right.
That has nothing to do. But when people hear rape, they don't hear what happened. They hear what they didn't want to happen.
Right.
Which is like, now I'm a bad person because of it.
Right.
And she was like, there has to be, like, we have to begin to teach people how to think for themselves. She's like, when rape is taught in a way where boys see that this is an infraction upon their own masculinity,
right.
I think that's when you just begin to change the culture of it, because the assumption that it's bad and good, it always creates these rules of then certain people deserve to have it to them. So like so certain people deserve to have it happen to them. Yeah, so it's like, oh, she's a whore, so like
Right.
thus she deserves it. Yeah, but it's like if you create this other language of like, no, like rape is about power.
Yeah.
There is nothing she can ask for if it's about power, because even if she doesn't ask for it,
Right.
Right. So it's one of those things that I feel like, once again, coming back to the novel and to the book, it's this thing of like our society constantly wanting answers that clean up the mess
Yes.
that is living.
Yes.
As opposed to like, how do we think about mess
Yes.
and how to organize it in our
Yes.
own lives. Before you get out of here, I would love to have you read something.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite section that you read?
I can read a little from the beginning. Sometimes I read, there's the beginning of the second
Okay.
section, which would, here, I can show Yeah, hang on. So I can either read what I sometimes read as is just from here.
Mm-hmm.
I could read from here to that there.
Okay.
Does that seem a good amount?
Give me some.
Okay.
Give me some. Do you wanna get the vocal cords ready, or you
No,
good?
I'm okay.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
okay. Delicious as it is. I feel like then I might not be able to read. Who knows, right? I'm also a little blind, but I think I can do it without fishing for my glasses.
Okay.
It's a different story depending on where you start. Who's good, who's bad, what it all means. Each of us shapes our stories so they make sense of who we think we are. I can begin when Cassie and I were best friends, or I can begin when we weren't anymore, or I can begin at the dark end and tell it all backward. There's no beginning before, though. Cassie and I met at nursery school, and I can't remember a time when I didn't know her, when I didn't pick her sleek white head out of a crowd and know exactly where she was in a room and think of her some ways as mine. Cassie was tiny, with bones like a bird. She was always the smallest girl in the class, and the span of her ankle was the span of my wrist. She had shiny white blonde hair, almost albino she was so fair, her skin translucent and a little pink. But you'd be wrong to mistake her size and pallor for frailty. All you had to do was to look into her eyes, still blue eyes that turned gray in dark weather like the water in the quarry, and you could see that she was tough. Strong, I guess, is a better word, although, of course, in the end she wasn't strong enough. But even when we were small, she had a quality about her, a what the hell and I'm not chicken or you sort of way. According to my mother and to Cassie's mother, Bev, Cassie and I became friends in the second week of nursery when we were 4 years old. That was always the story, though I can't tell now whether I remember it or have just been told so many times that I invented the memory. I was playing with a group of kids in the sandbox, and Cassie stood in the middle of the playground, hands at her sides like a zombie, staring at everything, not apparently nervous, but totally detached. I left my friends to come touch her elbow, and I said, so I was told, hey, come build a castle with me. And she broke into that rare, broad smile of hers, a famous smile made all the better when she was bigger by the Georgia Jagger gap between her front teeth. She came with me back to the sandbox. And that, my mother always said, was that.
Yeah. That's dope. See you later. So hot you're knocking things over.
There we go. I'm lit.
Yeah. Boom. The match, we got it. So one of the things immediately reading, I love that. The whole idea of like, sometimes things don't begin or end, they just happen. And, I don't know if this is true for you, but I have a few friends where like I look at them, I go, how do we meet? Because they just always felt like they were a part of your life. And so you can't imagine your life without them, but you also don't imagine your life. You can't remember your life before them. Right. It was like you were just kind of always
part of it.
Always there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I've sort of not realized people were missing till they came back. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, like I haven't seen you in 2 years, but it don't feel like 2 years is, that's how measure these friendships. So, I got to give you something because you came on the show, and it's because you're lit. So this is yours.
Oh, how exciting!
Yeah. Pop it open.
It's a great box.
Thank you. You know, presentation is everything.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
So that's yours. That's yours.
Can I put that on? I'm gonna put that on.
Yeah, pop this on. So it's a lit pen.
I know.
All the guests get them.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that. I thought I was special.
You are special.
Yeah.
You know, so special enough. Hold on, you gotta. That's.
Oh, look!
So,
you sign it.
yeah.
Look. No, then I should keep it in here for right now. I'm gonna keep it. It'll take two. Should I put it on or not put it on?
I mean, either way.
I'm gonna put it on. I gotta keep the box though.
So.
Look at that. Look, they're already. It's like they're pre-made holes in my shirt.
You knew you were coming.
Yeah.
You knew you were lit before you got here. That's why you're here.
One.
What events you got coming up where people can see you
Well,
in action? I'm just gonna.
Yep.
Just so you make sure you're straight.
Yeah. No, I haven't put the second one in yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I am reading tonight at Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Upper West Side.
Upper West Side.
The West Side one.
And then.
I always confuse those two. I end up on the East
we
Side
go.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have to like run across town.
I think
But
it's the West Side. I think so.
the West Side. East Side.
Oops.
It's the East Side. See, you're gonna have people at the.
I'm gonna be in the wrong bookstore. That's a problem. That'd be sad.
This is yeah. So this, and then what else coming in the future?
In New York or just around?
Just
and about?
general. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna be out in San Francisco.
Okay.
Early next week.
Okay.
And I got some things up in Boston way. I'm in Texas later in November.
Austin, Houston.
Austin and Houston.
Okay.
And then Portland, Seattle, Detroit, Vermont, Albany.
You got a rock star
I've
schedule.
got a lot going on. And I'm back in New York in November 16th at the 92nd Street Y.
All right. Yeah. Are you in a conversation with anybody? Or you just
no, but I'm reading along with John Banville, and I'm reading with Salman Rushdie next Thursday in Philadelphia.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
It sounds like
cool.
that's the thing. So your literary swag. I don't know if you remember, or so your literary swag is your favorite 3 writers.
Okay.
And your favorite 3 clothing designers.
Okay, my favorite 3 writers.
If you don't want to offend any of your living friends, I always tell people to go dead.
Go dead.
Just go dead.
Yeah, because just three living is.
Because people like, you ain't saved me, Claire. What's the problem? So you're
I
just
know.
like, listen.
I'm gonna. It's wise advice. I'm gonna go dead. And I'm gonna say Italo Svevo.
Okay.
Yeah, Italian writer of the early part of the century. I'm gonna say Camus.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm gonna say Virginia Woolf.
That's a good look.
Okay.
And what about the swag?
3 favorite designers. Well, there's a little local. I think they're based here in New York. Called A Piece Apart.
Okay.
It's just they're just
in the pocket.
yeah, but beautiful
Yeah.
things. And then, well, they're designers that I love. I don't own anything that they.
If you love it, you love it.
Well, someday I would like to own something. Like I feel like I always love the ads. Celine. You know. No, you don't like those?
Yes.
Yeah,
the
like
price tag, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, it's never gonna
You
happen.
just pick it up and you're like.
But I love the photos. The photos always look good. Yeah. But so
we're gonna do a campaign, Claire for Celine. You gotta get.
I could do a Kickstarter.
Just get you on a. They did didn't they do Joan Didion was the face of Celine.
That seems right.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
We gonna campaign. We gonna
Yeah.
get
Also,
you on.
what's her name? Serge Gainsbourg's daughter.
Charlotte.
Didn't she do the Celine?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, she's a French actress. I feel like she did. And then a third. I need a third one. Well,
what shoes? Where do you reliably go? Like, I feel like the shoe is one of the most important parts of it.
I'm gonna vote for these most comfortable by this little designer in Austin. So her first name's Elizabeth and last name Suzann. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Suzanne.
Suzanne. Yeah.
Okay.
It's mostly clothes, but there's just these mules, the most comfortable ever. Mm-hmm.
All right. So, can people follow you on social? Any kind of social media how's your social media?
I'm not going to say Twitter because I have a thing, but I'm just so hopeless. It's not worth it. Like once every 6 months, I retweet somebody
What's up,
else.
y'all?
Yeah. No, not even. I just retweet somebody else every 6 months. But I have an Instagram. I think it's just my name.
Yeah, it's Claire Messud.
Yeah.
This is Claire Messud. All right. So, this has been another episode of Lit with the host Yadon Israel, aka Liddy Fontaine. We just had Claire Messud up here Do you have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Just a huge thank you. This has been so fun.
Thank you. Thank you. So make sure y'all watch the episode. Make sure you buy A Burning Girl. That's wherever books are sold, right? Right, more or less. And make sure you get this book. And by get, I mean buy. Operative word. All right? So this is Liddy Fontaine. We out.